Founded in 2003, New Mexicans for Sustainable Energy and Effective Stewardship, New Mexico Seas, brings together more than a dozen citizen organizations to develop an alternative future for New Mexico and the U.S. nuclear weapons complex. New Mexico Sea's mission is to promote informed opposition to nuclear weapons programs, advocate for stringent environmental and health safety regulations, promote alternatives to dependency on nuclear weapons funding, and build stewardship and capacity within impacted communities. New Mexico is home for two of the three U.S. nuclear weapons laboratories, Los Alamos and Sandia, and the only underground nuclear waste disposal site, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIPP. These facilities are all operated by the U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE. New Mexico's congressional delegation, especially Senators Pete Domenici and Jeff Bingaman, and Representatives Heather Wilson and Tom Udall, play a large role in congressional appropriations funding and policy regarding nuclear weapons and renewable energy. Thus, New Mexico plays an essential role in nuclear weapons research, development, testing, and production, and their environmental impacts, as well as in U.S. nuclear weapons policy. New Mexico Seas engages in a wide variety of public education, research, and advocacy activities, and on occasion litigation and lobbying efforts to implement our work plan. Representatives of the member groups will highlight a few of our accomplishments related to Los Alamos, Sandia, and WIPP, as well as our future work to stop new nuclear weapons and plutonium pit production, clean up contamination from Los Alamos and Sandia that threaten our vital water supplies, and redefine the mission of the laboratories to promote New Mexico as a center for the renewable energy industry and non-weapons technology development.
In New Mexico, 9 out of 10 people depend upon groundwater for their drinking water. And so any contamination of groundwater by Department of Energy facilities with radioactive materials is a very serious problem.
Los Alamos National Laboratory is located on the Pajarito Plateau, which is made up of volcanic tuff. Now, Los Alamos National Laboratory has buried over 18 million cubic feet of radioactive, toxic, and hazardous waste on the mesa here. Contaminants have been found in surface water, in groundwater, and in the springs along the Rio Grande. It's important to know that 40% of the drinking water that is pumped for the city of Santa Fe comes from the Buckman well field. And recently the city of Santa Fe reported a finding of plutonium-238 here at the river in one of the drinking water wells. This is the river where we float. We float from the Buckman down to Cochiti Dam, and we go out for 3 days and 2 nights on sampling trips. We sample the springs along the Rio Grande, along below Los Alamos National Laboratory. One of the things that CCNS has done is, with groundwater hydrologist George Rice, is that we've done a reanalysis of LANL's data about the travel times for the contaminants. And when we started our work, LANL was talking about travel times of tens of thousands of years from these facilities up here down to the river. And as a result of George Rice's work, he estimated that a particle could leave the radioactive liquid waste treatment facility at TA50 and travel the 8 miles to the Rio Grande in 26 years or less. And since that work has been done, LANL changed their travel times to decades, which is a significant feat for a citizen group to accomplish such a large change within the laboratory.
As I became involved in New Mexico Seas, one of the obvious things that became very obvious right at the beginning was the water was a key issue. The core of it is really the fact that the waste from Los Alamos as it impacts the rivers, is going to impact everybody downstream. And most of the population in New Mexico lives downstream. And most of the population in New Mexico that live downstream are looking at the Rio Grande for their drinking water. And so we feel that we have a tremendous opportunity to educate and bring people on board around this issue. I think that our biggest challenge, of course, is going to be in terms of getting the United States Congress to see that this issue is a national issue, that Los Alamos has to be cleaned up, and that cleaning it up is going to require a tremendous amount of resources, and that now is the time to put those resources in there.
New Mexico acequias are a very integral part of our culture. There are over 1,000 acequias in northern New Mexico and in the mountainous parts of southern New Mexico. In terms of the concerns we have right now about water waste coming from the Los Alamos area is that could affect irrigation and in communities where this water is used to grow crops such as corn and squash and other items. I think the work that CCW is doing can help us monitor those impacts as we proceed forward in improving the water quality monitoring efforts to make sure that we're growing good food.
My name is Marian Naranjo. I am from the pueblo of Santa Clara. Since Santa Clara is one of what we call the Accord tribes, meaning is that our proximity to the lab is very close, and agreements have been made with the lab and the 4 Accord tribes. The Jemez Mountains is our Aboriginal homelands, the home of our ancestors. And it's a very sacred place to us. And Los Alamos National Laboratory is within our sacred areas. So at this time, with the formation of the coalitions, Communities for Clean Water, and the work being done by the New Mexico Seas groups, with my involvement as a Pueblo community group, I feel that it is very powerful and that we can all have common goals of clean air and water for the future generations to come.
In the year 2000, there was the Grande fire, and that was a fire that burned over 7,500 acres of property. And the areas it burned were some of the technical areas, TA36, TA16, and those are the sites where they've exploded over 135 tons historically of depleted uranium and many, many, many tons of high explosives. The plume of that fire sat over the Embudo Valley and the higher mountain regions for 12 days. We're directly downwind of Los Alamos National Laboratory. There hasn't been any regional monitoring or sampling done in that area. And so after the fire, we decided we would implement citizen-based monitoring in order to understand our environment and to understand the impacts of living downwind from the nuclear weapons facility. So the reason we do citizen-based monitoring is we have the need to have our own information. This belongs to the public. This is information, this is data that belongs to everybody. And this way we can track in our own environment what's accumulating in our environment directly as a result from operations at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
A couple of years ago, the Department of Energy proposed to conduct what it called open burning, open detonation experiments at 2 locations at Los Alamos National Laboratory. And the materials that were going to be detonated and burned included a number of quite hazardous materials, including depleted uranium and spent fuel oil. And there was a great deal of concern by people in downwind communities about what this was going to mean in terms of what was going to be carried into those communities by the winds, the prevailing winds coming from Los Alamos National Laboratory. 3 groups filed an appeal to the State Environmental Improvement Board from a decision that was made by the State Environment Department granting permits for these experiments. And we represented those 3 groups in the appeal to the Environmental Improvement Board. The Los Alamos National Laboratory, that is the Department of Energy and the University of California, withdrew their applications for the permits that were involved. And in other words, they just backed down. And that situation or that outcome is an example of the success that a group like NMCs can have because it is a coordinated coalition of groups that have common concerns that are working together.
Federal law prohibits high-level waste at WIPP, but in 2004, the Department of Energy proposed bringing high-level waste to WIPP. New Mexico Seas rallied New Mexicans from around the state to oppose those wastes, and thousands wrote letters and sent cards in opposition. As a result, Governor Richardson and Environment Secretary Ron Curry rejected the DOE plan and instead, as NMCs proposed, put an additional prohibition on high-level waste in the WIPP operating permit. That prohibition strengthens the barriers to high-level waste at WIPP and provides another opportunity for effective citizen participation and potential litigation in the likely scenario in the future that DOE once again proposes high-level waste at WIPP.
I'm the coordinator, one of 2 coordinators, of a project called the Nukes Next Door. This is a project of the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice. It's a project that concerns Sandia National Laboratories, and it's a monitoring project. We first began asking 3 questions. What was going on with Molly 99 reactor, the depleted uranium testing at Sandia National Labs, and also the mixed waste landfill. 3 scientists helped us research those 3 projects. We found that those 3 projects were all contaminating our air and our water. And we put those projects into a lay-friendly booklet, the Nukes Next Door. Today we're beginning to talk to our government representatives about what's really happening at Sandia National Labs, about the inadequate monitoring, about the many polluting projects, and about what we want: adequate monitoring and tighter oversight of our nuclear neighbor.
Our organization has been involved for the past 9 years in dealing with the radioactive and hazardous waste that have been left over after nuclear weapons production at the Sandia National Laboratories. One of the special emphases of our organization is on the mixed waste landfill, which has 700,000 cubic feet of radioactive and hazardous waste buried in it, and it lies above Albuquerque's groundwater, which is the drinking water supply for the city of Albuquerque. These are some of the fragile containers that are in the unlined trenches and pits out at the mixed waste landfill. You can see they're just metal barrels, boxes with plastic sometimes. There might be bottles or just regular plastic bags too. One of the problems that we have faced is we have learned that the monitoring, the well monitoring network at Sandia Laboratories is quite defective for detecting contaminants. So we're trying to get a reliable well monitoring system installed at the dump, and recently we've gotten the New Mexico Environment Department to order replacement of 3 wells at that location. We have many challenges ahead though in getting adequate soil gas, air monitoring, and groundwater monitoring.
Our 2006 statewide poll showed that the majority of voters, 57%, are concerned about the environmental impacts of building new nuclear weapons components, and that's up from 48% in 2003. That shows that our message is getting through and provides the public support we need to have our congressional delegation support cutting nuclear weapons funding.
I think that our most far-reaching success to date springs from having asked Senator Jeff Bingaman to sponsor legislation that would require independent review of plutonium pit lifetimes. Plutonium pit lifetimes. Plutonium pits are the nuclear triggers for weapons. And we knew at the time that DOE was conducting its own so-called accelerated aging experiments. However, given that hundreds of billions of dollars of future taxpayers' appropriations were riding on the outcome, we didn't trust DOE's objectivity. Due to Senator Bingaman's legislation, independent experts found that plutonium pits, the crucial weapons component, last a century or more. This then seriously undermined DOE's claimed need for new design nuclear weapons, the so-called reliable replacement warheads that are such a source of controversy now. More recently, just this year, at our request, Senator Bingaman has also introduced legislation that would require DOE to estimate cost for these future new nuclear weapons. We believe that once Congress knows what these costs are, and these are costs that to date DOE has refused to provide, but once these costs are known, Congress will be even more reluctant to fund these new nuclear weapons, especially when they're not needed to begin with.
That's the wrong signal to be sending other countries at this point in time.
That signal is already on the way. How much stronger it gets depends on how much money Congress gives Landfill and how many nuclear triggers the lab produces.
Now, this independent review of plutonium pit lifetimes that we initiated also seriously undermined DOE's claimed need for expanded plutonium pit production, both here at Los Alamos and at a proposed modern pit facility. New Mexico Seas groups vigorously fought against bringing this new bomb factory to New Mexico. Nuke Watch also helped catalyze a national fight against this new mega bomb factory. Ultimately, Congress blocked the modern pit facility. And even this year, Congress has blocked DOE's scaled-down version of the modern pit facility called the Consolidated Plutonium Complex. Given the terrible history at Rocky Flats, the former plutonium pit production site near Denver, these victories are very significant, both in the sphere of nuclear weapons policies and for the protection of the environment.
And I'm a Sister Loretto within the Loretto community. And the Loretto community is comprised of Sisters of Loretto plus co-members who want to participate with us in our mission and spirituality. And some of them are men, some are women, married, single, and of a different religious backgrounds. In 1979, the Loretto community issued a public statement letting people know that we have committed ourselves to working for nuclear disarmament. And I am commissioned to represent Loretto in public statements and in hearings related to New Mexico Sea's goal of changing the mission of the labs. New Mexico Seas periodically distributes postcards for people to send, petitions to sign, and action alerts, which I send to the Loretto community. Some of the issues that Loretto has participated in include the Landfill site-wide environmental statement. We also have been involved in the modern pit facility, the reliable replacement warhead, Complex 2030, Biosafety Lab, and the CMRR. We also work on waste issues, and the Global Nuclear Energy Program. And then the latest issue that we've been working on is diversification to begin to move Los Alamos into more and more non-nuclear issues and programs. I feel privileged to participate in the work of New Mexico Seas because I think it is really important to change the mission of Los Alamos Lab and Sandia Lab away from nuclear weapons production.
I wanted to help our youth be more aware of the dangers and the effects of nuclear productions. I began to do outreach in high schools and middle schools, and so far each and every teacher were completely satisfied and grateful with our presentations. I feel good when I leave the classroom knowing that I helped make students become more aware of the problems we are facing today. I believe this work has a positive effect on our future.
New Mexico Seas, as a collaborative, has had tremendous success in stopping a planned biological weapons capable production site at Los Alamos National Lab, which is a nuclear weapons production facility. Thousands of petitions have been collected and presented at Department of Energy public hearings on this issue. Certainly the study of biological pathogens is an important endeavor, but it must be done in the sunshine of a publicly accountable facility, not behind the locked doors of a secretive laboratory like Los Alamos National Lab. It also threatens the viability of the International Biological Weapons Convention. So we need to stop this facility now.
Nukewatch has been very active in opposing facilities that would research bioweapons pathological agents at DOE. We sued in federal court over the adequacy of environmental reviews for biolabs at both Los Alamos and the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory in California. As the result of our litigation, DOE withdrew its approval for the Los Alamos biolab until it had completed a more comprehensive environmental review. That was almost 4 years ago. Despite that, Los Alamos started to actively plan for so-called interim operations at that biolab. A single letter from our attorney stopped that bad idea in its tracks. Concerning the biolab in California, we won a court ruling that DOE must consider the consequences of potential terrorism or sabotage at that facility. Subsequently, the Department of Energy issued guidance that all of its sites had to conduct analysis of what it calls intentional destructive acts. This is a precedent that we set for the good of citizens nationwide.
Well, working with NMCs has been very beneficial to the state of New Mexico and to the Environment Department. And what I'm thinking about is two things. Number one is the folks who have come forward and represented NMCs to us represent a large variety of people and issues in the state of New Mexico. And they've come forward and made it easier for us to work with them in a transparent way. One of the things that came from that sort of activity is that in 2005, November of 2005, the Governor Richardson, signed an executive order for environmental justice. So that, to me, would not have taken place if people like New Mexico Seas had not started talking about the idea of integrating process from the community into the regulatory process. New Mexico Seas, through their community groups that they work with and are associated with them, have helped us, especially in northern New Mexico, and allowing people who are affected by the lab's activities to make their point clear to us and do it in such a way that, again, going back to my first point, they get to integrate that into the regulatory process where it's heard in advance of a hearing and actually can help formulate how people feel about a permit. Even though it's not in a formal nature, the communication has increased greatly because of getting people involved early in the process.
As long as nuclear weapons remain a key component of U.S. foreign and military policy, New Mexico will be a key state. And the legacy of environmental contamination will persist for thousands of generations. Thus, great challenges remain to successfully achieving that alternative future that we're promoting. New Mexico Seas is committed to working in New Mexico and with organizations nationally to bring about that brighter future for present and future generations. We invite you to join us and support us.